My neighbor is a YouTuber. Over the years I've had the opportunity to observe a lot of things. Like choking on cinnamon, or lying on the hood of a car slowly sliding down a hill. Or dousing himself with supposedly cold water. And he was doing it all while shouting at the top of his lungs, "Epic wine. Epic fail," and other hackneyed phrases. Take my word for it. This reckless pursuit of viral popularity was really starting to get on my nerves. So when he knocked on my door one fine day and asked me to get his mail for him because he was going away for a couple of weeks, I was over the moon. For once I could at least get a little break from that jerk. I'd always feared that one day his antics might affect me, too. The first few days were quite ordinary. He got a couple of bills, some spam, and, I realized, a birthday card. But one evening, on my way home, I found an impressive-sized cardboard box on my neighbor's porch. On it was written in big red letters, "Return to sender." Despite the fact that I am far from a deadbeat, I must admit that it cost me a great deal of effort to lift the box, it was so heavy. As I dragged it across the street, I realized that it would be impossible to get it through the front door, much less up the stairs. So I decided to drag her to the garage. I had never parked my car there. By the way, the sliding garage door worked every once in a while. It was easier to leave the car on the side of the road near the house than to mess with my head every morning. I realize now that I should have put the box on the ground before I opened the gate. And so, kicking the damn gate, I dropped the box and it collapsed to the ground. Something inside it crunched. Damn, I cursed. I wanted to believe that I hadn't broken anything of value. Of course, I wasn't going to tell my neighbor about this little incident. He would think it was the post office that had damaged the package. I managed to wrestle the stubborn gate with my free hands, and it rose with a loud screech. I dragged the box to the corner of the garage and left it there, after which I forgot it existed. At least for a few days. After a while, I smelled an odor. Apparently it was seeping through a crack under the door from the garage. The rancid aroma was reminiscent of the kind of crap that skunks squirt. For the first couple of days I suspected skunks. I wondered if someone had run over an animal on the road, and its scent had reached my house. But, quickly realizing that the smell was only getting stronger every day, I set about looking for the source. As soon as I opened the door to the garage, an unbearable stench hit me in the face. Clutching my nose, I went inside. It didn't take me long to find the stench. After all, the only recent new thing in my garage was that box. I came to a perfectly logical conclusion. It must be some kind of subscription to the monthly meat mailing list. And that meat outside the refrigerator, of course, was starting to rot. But how much meat did you have to cram into the box to make it that heavy? A whole cow. I walked over to the box, clamping my nose in one hand and holding a pair of scissors in the other. In fact, I could have done without them. The bottom of the box was soaked with slime that I could easily pierce it with my finger. But I didn't feel much like sticking my hands into the hell out of it. That's why I took the scissors, because if I tried to lift or drag the box, its contents would immediately fall out on the floor, and I would have to stuff the meat smeared on the floor into bags and carry them outside. No way. The scissors easily cut through the duct tape. Until that second, I didn't think the stench would get any worse. Gods, I was wrong. The stench came over me from the box, and I recoiled. It felt like opening a hot oven, except that instead of heat, a whole palette of scents rushed over me: urine, sweat, shit, and rot. The stench was so horrible that I recoiled and struggled to suppress an urge to gag, and then rushed out of the garage, out into the street, to the fresh air. But even though I'd only been near the box for a few seconds, the smell was soaking through my clothes that it followed me like a stinky shadow. I tried my best to beat the stench out of my nostrils. No air fresheners, no medical masks, no shower 3 times, no change of clothes. Every extra second the ransacked box spent in my garage was an extra second of torture. I had no choice. I had to act, and so I walked into the garage again. This time in full gear, a clothespin on my nose, a garbage bag in one hand, and the most powerful air freshener I could find in the other. and long rubber gloves to avoid any contact between the contents of Pandora's box and my skin. In the end, however, as it turned out, all of this was unnecessary. I didn't have to put anything away, but had to relive the moment over and over again in my dreams for months on end. You see, there really was meat in the box. But it wasn't beef or pork. It was my neighbor, or rather, his hunched-over corpse. I called the police, and, naturally, they took me in for questioning. I understand them. It's hard not to be suspicious of someone who has kept someone's body in his garage for days. Fortunately, they quickly found out that I had nothing to do with it. Even though the ill-fated box was covered in my fingerprints, and my house reeked of deadness even from the outside. It did not matter, for in the hands of the neighbor himself there was undeniable proof of my innocence. A video camera. I had seen the tape exactly once. I'm not sure if the police had the right to show me the investigation file. Maybe they felt so sorry for me that they thought it would be a good idea. Anyway, I looked at the tape. A neighbor was sitting in a box outside the post office building, laughing and talking about how he was about to mail himself through the states. He had taken urine bottles, food, a pillow, and a couple of flashlights with him. His buddy, a guy I'd seen a few times at a neighbor's house, closed the box and apparently carried it to the shipment. Over the course of a few hours, or maybe days, my neighbor recorded short clips from time to time, covering the situation. Something along the lines of, "I think I'm in the truck. I can feel it moving. Now I think I'm in a warehouse. It's pretty warm in here. I still have plenty of food." Then, in the last entry, the box fell down. He broke his neck. The end. The camera kept recording until the battery died or the memory ran out. There's something I didn't tell the police about. Something I won't forget until the day I die. Right after my neighbor fell and broke his neck, I heard a familiar sound, the heavy scraping of the garage door.
A year ago I divorced my husband, my daughter and I moved into a new house. The house is small and cozy, 2 bedrooms, a living room, a bathroom, and a kitchen. We especially like the second bedroom, a large, spacious room with a huge window almost the entire wall. Kate told us right away that it would be her room. It was the beginning of summer, the vacations, and Kate didn't have to go to school, she had moved up to 3rd grade. So she spent all her free time in her room reading books or sitting in front of the computer. 2 weeks later, when we were completely settled in our new place, we found a kitten. Kate, like many children, loves animals, and so do I. We took him in and named him Chips. It all started 2 days after Chips arrived. Kate and I were watching a cartoon in the living room, or rather, I was watching and Kate was already peacefully asleep in her chair. Suddenly, just for a second, there was a strange squeaking sound in her room. I went into the room to check what it was. On the floor, almost in the middle of the room, was Chip's body. I couldn't move for a while. It was a horrible sight. Almost all of his insides were out and smeared on the floor, and his back leg was still twitching. But the last straw for me was that in all this bloody mess were clearly visible traces of children's hands. Only the thought that my daughter might wake up and see all this horror made me pull myself together. I still remember scrubbing it all away. After the unplanned cleanup, I returned to the living room. Without waking Kate, I settled on the couch and spent the night watching TV in a stupor. In the morning Kate asked me where Chips was, and I told her he wasn't back from the street yet. After breakfast, I sent my daughter to my father's, that is, her grandfather's. When I was left alone, I began to shiver, unable to do anything with myself. I went to bed after midnight and fell asleep surprisingly quickly. I woke up to a noise. When I finally woke up, I realized that Kate was calling me from her room. As I got out of bed, I belatedly remembered that Kate was at her grandfather's right now. The fear was instantaneous. I froze in place, and the sound of, "Mom, Mom, Mommy," came from the room even louder and clearer. I stood like that for a minute and dashed to the door, which had a very impressive deadbolt on it. When I closed the door, I leaned back against it and settled on the floor. The feelings I felt at that moment are unspeakable. Endless, just endless, animal terror. About an hour had passed, and I was beginning to fall asleep, when something banged on the door from the other side, and the words began to be repeated, the timbre of the voice rising with each time. There was a terrible rumble in the hallway, something banging against the door and the walls. It sounded small, but it was very strong. It went on like that for half an hour. I sat on the floor under the door and just roared. Soon my nerves failed, and I passed out. As I came to, I looked at the time on the wall clock. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. Not a single thing in the hallway was intact. The dresser, the clothes rack, the shoes, all had been ripped apart and smashed to splinters. Even on the walls, in some places, pieces of plaster and wallpaper had been chipped away. And so it was all over the house. I ran away from the damn house and only came back once, along with my father, to get my papers and things. Now Kate and I live in a new apartment. I sold that house without telling the buyer. I couldn't. I still wonder why it didn't kick in the door to my room when it trashed half the house. Was it playing with me?